My name is Elias Campbell. I was 17 years old when the world as I knew it ended on a Tuesday, July 14th, 2015. We lived in Savannah, Georgia, a place where the air doesn't just sit, it clings to you like a wet wool blanket. That afternoon, the heat index hit 104 degrees. I was in the backyard, trying to finish mowing the lawn before my shift at the grocery store. I remember the smell of gasoline and freshly sheared grass, and I remember the exact moment my heart decided it had done enough. It wasn't a sharp pain like you see in the movies. It was a sudden, hollow thud in my chest, followed by a coldness that shouldn't have been possible in that sun. I stopped the mower. The silence that followed was terrifying. I tried to take a breath, but my lungs felt like they were filled with concrete. I reached for the fence post, my fingers brushing the rough, sun-bleached wood, but my knees gave out before I could grip it. I hit the dirt hard. I could see the ants scurrying around a fallen peach near my face, their tiny movements incredibly fast compared to the heavy, sluggish rhythm of my fading pulse. I wanted to yell for my mom, who was inside making iced tea, but my throat was a desert. Though why didn't matter then. Later, the doctors would call it hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a silent killer, a thickening of the heart muscle that no one knew I had. But in that moment, it was just the earth coming up to meet me. My vision began to tunnel, the vibrant green of the lawn turning into a muddy, flickering gray. I felt my cheek pressed against the stinging weeds, and then the sound of the world just cut out. It wasn't a fade to black. It was a physical disconnection, like a plug being pulled from a wall. 1 second I was a teenager with a shift at 4 p.m., and the next, I was nowhere. There was no tunnel yet, no bright light. Just the sudden, crushing realization that the mechanical process of being Elias stopped. The next thing I knew, I wasn't on the grass anymore. I was looking down at it. I watched my mom run out the back door, the screen door slamming with a tinny ring that I felt in my non-existent chest. She saw me and made a sound I hope no one ever has to hear, a jagged, animalistic wail. She dropped the plastic pitcher of tea, and it shattered on the patio, orange liquid and ice cubes scattering like glass. I saw her hands shaking as she fumbled for her phone, her fingers slick with sweat and panic. The paramedics arrived in what felt like seconds, though I know now it was 11 minutes. I watched them work on the ground. I saw the lead medic, a guy with a graying mustache and a name tag that read Miller, rip open my shirt. He didn't look like a hero. He looked exhausted and focused. I watched the rhythmic, brutal force of the chest compressions. I saw my ribs flex under the pressure, a sight that should have been sickening but felt strangely distant. Start in 4, 1 milligram of AP. Miller barked. I watched the needle slide into my arm, an arm that looked like wax, pale and lifeless. They used the defibrillator twice. Clear. My body jolted, a grotesque puppet snap, but the monitor they'd hooked up stayed flat. I was hovering near the gutter of the roof, noticing a tennis ball stuck there that I'd lost 3 years ago. The contrast was haunting, the mundane reality of a lost toy and the clinical violence of a resuscitation attempt. I wasn't afraid. I was just profoundly aware of the data. My blood pressure was non-existent. My brain was beginning to starve. In the ambulance, the siren was a dull vibration I could see rather than hear. Miller kept his eyes on the monitor, his jaw tight. "Come on, kid," he whispered. "Don't do this." I wanted to tell him it was okay, but I was already being pulled further back, the walls of the ambulance dissolving into a vast, silent gray. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial antiseptic. I followed the gurney into trauma room 4 at Memorial Health. The chaos was organized, but the energy was grim. I stood in the corner, unnoticed, watching the doctor, a woman with tired eyes, check my pupils. She shook her head. They had been working on me for 45 minutes. In the medical world, that's usually the end of the line. The golden hour was nearly up, and I was still a corpse. "Time of death?" a nurse asked, her voice hovering over a clipboard. That's when the room didn't just fade, it folded. The hospital walls didn't disappear. They became transparent, then translucent, until the machines and the crying of my father in the hallway were just echoes in a deep well. I wasn't in a hallway or a meadow. I was standing on what looked like a vast, dark pane of glass that stretched forever. It wasn't cold. It wasn't hot. It was just hollow. Then I saw him. He wasn't glowing with a blinding, cinematic radiance that hides the features. He was just there. He was wearing a simple, dark tunic, and his skin looked like it had been weathered by the same Savannah sun I'd just left. He didn't look like a painting. He looked like a man who had worked with his hands his entire life. He was leaning against nothing, watching me with an expression that wasn't pity. It was a heavy, weighted recognition. I looked down at my own hands. They weren't glowing either. I felt a surge of teenage ego, a desperate need to justify my life. I was a good kid, I said. My voice didn't ring out. It was flat and small. I did what I was supposed to. I went to church. I worked. I didn't get it wrong. He stood up straight then, and the space around us seemed to contract, the darkness becoming denser. He didn't smile. He looked at me with a gaze that felt like it was peeling back layers of skin. "Elias," he said, and the sound of my name felt like a physical weight. "You think the wrong is about what you did in the dark, but look at what you did in the light." He gestured behind him, and the glass floor began to show images, not of my sins, but of my everyday life. The surface beneath my feet didn't just show my life. It felt like it was breathing it back at me. I saw myself at 17, sitting in the third row of Grace Covenant on a Sunday morning. I looked perfect. My shirt was ironed, my Bible was open, and I was nodding along to the sermon about the Great Commission. I looked like the poster child for a faithful life. But as I watched, the image shifted. I saw what I was actually thinking in that moment. I wasn't thinking about God. I was thinking about the girl sitting 2 rows ahead of me, wondering if my hair looked okay from the back. I saw the pride I felt when the youth pastor praised my servant's heart for setting up the chairs, a pride that had nothing to do with service and everything to do with being seen. Jesus didn't move. He just watched the images with me. "We think we are building a kingdom," he said, his voice like the low hum of a transformer. "But you are only building a monument to yourselves. You've turned the good news into a social club with an entrance fee of appearances." I felt a hot sting of shame. I saw a Tuesday afternoon at the Piggly Wiggly where I worked. A man had come in, clearly homeless, smelling of stale beer and old rain. He was $3 short for a gallon of milk and some bread. I had followed the store policy to the letter. I was polite, but I was firm. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't override the system," I had said with a plastic smile. I watched as he walked out into the heat, empty-handed. In the vision, I saw myself check the time right after he left, wondering when my break was. I was following the rules. I whispered to the figure beside me. "The rules were never the point, Elias," he replied. His voice wasn't angry. It was heavy with a sorrow that felt older than the earth. He stepped closer, and the dark glass beneath us suddenly rippled like water. "You've spent your whole life trying to be right according to the world's measure of holiness. But your heart is a walled city. You let no one in, and you let nothing out. You think you've won the race because you stayed on the track, but you never actually ran." The scene shifted violently. The peaceful, dark glass was replaced by a flickering, jagged series of images that felt like a fever dream. I saw churches, not just mine, but thousands of them across the country. They looked like fortresses. Inside, people were shouting, but they weren't praying. They were arguing over ledgers, over carpet colors, over who was in and who was out. I saw a pastor standing behind a mahogany pulpit, his face red, shouting about taking back the culture. But as he spoke, I saw the people in the back pews. They looked malnourished, their spirits thin and gray, despite their expensive clothes. "Look at them," Jesus said. He pointed toward a specific building in a city I didn't recognize. It was a massive, modern structure with a coffee shop in the lobby. They have the name. They have the music. They have the lights. But I am standing outside the door, and no one is looking for the key. They've replaced me with a version of me that likes what they like and hates what they hate. He turned to me, and for the first time, his eyes seemed to burn with a terrifying clarity. "The title you've given your faith is life, but you are practicing death. You've got it all wrong, Elias. You think the warning is for the sinners outside the walls. You think the judgment is for the world, but the warning is for the house. The fire doesn't start in the streets. It starts in the sanctuary." Suddenly, I felt a sharp, physical pain in my chest, a phantom echo of the heart attack. The warning became a weight in my stomach. He wasn't talking about some distant apocalypse with monsters in the sky. He was talking about a rot inside the very things I trusted. I saw my own family's dinner table. My dad was arguing with my uncle about a political post on Facebook. They were both red-faced, veins popping in their necks, using scripture like a bludgeon to bruise each other. I saw my mom in the kitchen, silently crying because no one had asked how she was in 3 years. "This is the fracture," Jesus said. "The world is cold because the fire in the house has gone out. You are busy guarding the ashes while the people outside are freezing to death. And soon, the walls you built to keep them out will be the very thing that traps you inside when the roof comes down." The vision narrowed until I was back in my own bedroom in Savannah. It was late at night, a time I hadn't reached yet in my real life. I saw myself, a year older, sitting at my desk. I was holding an envelope. It was a rejection letter from the college I'd pinned all my hopes on. But that wasn't the fracture. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from my best friend, Caleb. We'd been inseparable since kindergarten. He was the one who helped me mow the lawn. He was the one I shared every secret with. The text read, "I can't do this anymore, Elias. Your family, your church, it's all fake. You say you love people, but you only love people who look like you. Don't call me." I watched my future self delete the message. I watched my face go cold and hard. I didn't cry. I didn't reach out. I just felt a sense of self-righteousness wash over me. "Fine," I thought in the vision. "If he's not one of us, he's against us. Stop." I cried out to the figure standing next to me on the dark glass. "I wouldn't do that. Caleb is my brother." "You already have," Jesus said. "Every time you stayed silent when he was mocked. Every time you chose the comfort of your group over the discomfort of the truth. You are losing the only people who actually know you because you are terrified of being wrong in front of the people who only know your mask." The image shifted again. I saw my father lose his job. The bank was calling. Our church family sent a few casseroles, but when the debt got deeper, the phone calls stopped. People looked away in the grocery store. The support system I'd spent my life building was made of sand. I saw my father sitting in his truck in the driveway, staring at the steering wheel for an hour because he was too ashamed to come inside. "This is the price of the wrong way," Jesus said. His hand touched my shoulder, and it felt like a brand. "You have traded intimacy for institution. You have traded mercy for merit. And when the merit runs out, and it always runs out, you will find yourselves utterly alone in a room full of people." The dark glass beneath us suddenly turned transparent, and I wasn't looking at my life anymore. I was looking at the heart of the warning. The wrong wasn't a mistake in theology. It was a fundamental shift in the human soul. Jesus turned to me, and the space between us seemed to vanish. There was no more distance. His voice didn't just reach my ears, it resonated in my marrow. "You asked why the world is breaking, Elias," he said. "You think it's because they left the path. But look closer." He pointed down. I saw a massive, intricate gears of a clock, but instead of metal, they were made of human faces. They were grinding against each other, skin tearing, eyes wide with a frantic, desperate hunger. "This is the success you pray for. This is the prosperity you demand. You've turned your faith into a transaction. You give me your Sunday mornings, and you expect a shield against the suffering of the world. You've made me a cosmic vending machine." The imagery was brutal. I saw a woman in our congregation, Mrs. Gable, who always wore the most expensive hats, sneering at a young mother whose toddler was crying during the service. I saw the deacons talking about protecting the brand of the church while ignoring the fact that the youth center's roof was leaking onto the kids from the trailer park. "The title of your story is We Got It Wrong because you've traded the cross for a ladder," Jesus said. His face was inches from mine now. "The cross is where you go to die to yourself. The ladder is what you use to climb over your neighbor. You've spent decades teaching people how to climb, and now, when the ladder breaks, you wonder why everyone is falling. The warning is this: the structures you've built to keep yourself safe are the very things that will crush you when the shaking begins. You are worshiping the walls, not the one who stands inside them." The confrontation intensified. I felt a sudden, agonizing pull, a spiritual tearing. I was shown a vision of a crowded courtroom. I saw a man I recognized from the local Christian radio station, a man everyone looked up to as a pillar of morality. He was sitting at the defense table, his face ashen, as evidence of a hidden, predatory life was read aloud. But the horror wasn't just his sin, it was the reaction of the people in the gallery. They weren't grieving for the victims. They were angry that the image had been tarnished. They were whispering about how this would look to the unbelievers. "This is the rot," Jesus whispered. "You care more about the shadow than the light. You would rather protect a lie that looks holy than embrace a truth that looks broken. And because of that, the truth is becoming your enemy." He stepped back, and I saw a wave of gray coldness sweeping across the suburbs of Georgia. It wasn't a physical storm, it was an emotional drought. I saw families sitting in beautiful living rooms, illuminated by the blue light of their phones, utterly incapable of speaking to one another. I saw the personal fracture I had felt earlier expanding like a crack in a windshield. My own father was there, standing in the kitchen, holding a glass of water, staring at a wall with an expression of such profound emptiness that I wanted to scream. "Why are you showing me this?" I cried out. "What am I supposed to do?" "You cannot fix a foundation while you are still trying to paint the windows," he replied. "The wrong is the belief that you can be mine without being broken. You want a crown without the thorns. You want the resurrection without the grave. But the grave is the only way back to the life I actually promised you." He reached out and touched my chest, right where the paramedics had been pounding. "The choice isn't between being good or bad, Elias. The choice is between being right and being real. One will save your reputation. Only the other will save your soul." The vast dark pane of glass began to dissolve into mist. I felt the weight of my physical body returning, the heavy, cold sensation of a heart that wasn't beating. The medical terminology I'd heard in the room, ventricular fibrillation, asystole, started to echo in the back of my mind like a ticking clock. I was hovering between two worlds. I could stay here in this hollow, honest silence with him, or I could go back to the humid, complicated chaos of Savannah. "If I go back," I said, my voice trembling, "everyone will think I'm crazy. They'll want me to say I saw pearls and gold. They'll want me to say everything is going to be fine for people like us." Jesus looked at me with a profound, unsettling stillness. "Tell them the fire is already in the house. Tell them that the things they are clinging to for safety are the very things that are drowning them. You will lose your standing. You will lose the comfort of the group. But you will find me in the debris." He didn't offer a hand to lead me back. He just waited. I realized that the warning wasn't just for the church or the world. It was a personal ultimatum. I saw a flash of my future if I chose the easy path. I'd become a deacon, I'd marry a nice girl, I'd work a steady job, and I would die inside, inch by inch, a hollow man in a polished suit. Then I saw the other path, a life of terrifying honesty, of speaking the wrongness out loud, of being the one who pointed at the cracks in the wall while everyone else was hanging pictures. "I choose the truth," I whispered. The moment the words left my mouth, the figure of Jesus didn't vanish. He seemed to expand until he was the only thing I could see. The darkness turned into a blinding, searing white, not the peaceful light people describe, but the light of an operating room, harsh and demanding. I felt a massive, crushing blow to my sternum. My lungs screamed for air. The smell of ozone and burnt skin hit my nose. "We have a rhythm," a voice shouted. It was Miller, the paramedic. He sounded miles away, but his voice was the anchor pulling me back into the heat, the pain, and the terrifying weight of the message I was now forced to carry. The sensation of slamming back into my ribs was like being hit by a freight train. My eyes snapped open, but I couldn't see. Everything was a jagged, overexposed white. The first thing I felt wasn't the relief of living. It was the agonizing, rhythmic pressure on my chest and the cold plastic of an intubation tube scraping against the back of my throat. I tried to gag, my body reacting with a primal jerk that nearly threw me off the gurney. "He's back. Elias, stay with us." Miller's voice was right in my ear, no longer a distant echo but a frantic, sweaty reality. I could smell the tobacco on his breath and the metallic tang of the defibrillator paddles. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream that the back he was welcoming me to was the very thing I'd been warned about. But I couldn't speak. I lay there, my heart thumping in a ragged, terrifying staccato, lube-dub, thud, silence, lube-dub, as they wheeled me through the double doors of the intensive care unit. The fluorescent lights overhead passed by like strobe flashes. I saw my mom's face for a split second as we blurred past a waiting area. She looked 10 years older than she had 20 minutes ago. Her eyes were hollowed out by a grief that hadn't quite left yet, even though I was breathing. The transition back to my life as we walked out into the lobby, I saw the woman from my vision, Mrs. Gable. She was standing at a teller window, counting a stack of hundreds for a vacation deposit. She saw us, saw my father's red eyes, and she didn't move. She didn't offer a hand. She looked at her manicured nails and turned her back, adjusting her expensive silk scarf. And then it happened. The concrete, irreversible event. As we stepped onto the sidewalk, I reached for the door handle. A small, brass plaque on the bank door caught the light. It was a donor plaque, gifted by the Grace Covenant Building Fund. The church, my church, had invested its surplus into the very bank that was now putting my family on the street. It was a closed loop of success and prosperity that had no room for the broken. I stood in the rain, the humidity finally broken by a cold front. I felt the weight of the message Jesus gave me. The fire was in the sanctuary. The walls were falling. I looked at the bank, then at the steeple of the church visible 3 blocks away. I didn't feel peace. I felt a terrifying, clear-eyed grief. I reached into my pocket and felt my phone buzz. It was a notification for the Church Harvest Festival Planning Committee. I deleted it. I turned and walked toward the truck, my feet heavy on the wet pavement, knowing that tomorrow the locks would be changed and the miracle boy would have nowhere to sleep.